Hello. The other day, Criminally made my tag of the Edge of Reading, and at the end of that video, he recommended this book as one that is related to linguistics and interpretation, and I didn't think more of it because I Criminally reads a lot of crime and horror, and those are the two genres that I read the least. I'm less interested on. However, the name stayed on my mind, and I think I've heard of it before or something, and the book sounded interesting. And then I went to a friend's house, and there I was in the kitchen, and I'm not superstitious, but when something shows up more than normal in the same day, I tend to sort of take that as a sign that I should read it. So I checked the book, I read it on that kitchen a little bit, and now I'm on the 7th chapter, and yeah, might be the weirdest book I've read. There's many layers. You have in the footnotes, there is the comments on the actual text, but you also have personal comments of the writer that in the footnotes talks about how he was scammed by some guys that make him believe he was a good boxer in clandestine fights, and then they scammed him, and then they got him to work for them. So that's one layer. That's all happening in the footnotes. Completely, it seems completely disjointed from the main story. The main story is Davidson, this photographer that won the Pulitzer for taking a picture of a starving kid in Ethiopia. I think it was Ethiopia. And his family moved to a house. This house seems normal, but then suddenly they go for a holiday. They come back, and there's a new door in the house. That triggers a domino effect. There's a bunch of things that happen. Davidson finds out that the house is bigger on the outside and the inside than it is on the outside for a few inches. Another door appears, another passage. It's a crack on the reality, right? So you have that happening on one side, you have the footnotes on the other side, then you have other footnotes that are more like actual comments on the text, because the text is clearly referential, it's always referring to something else. It's also there's a big difference in style as well. The way the report, because the first the main story is reading as a report. It has poetic touches. It sometimes is reading more philosophically, but it's more like this is what happened. These are the events, and we are recording them as they happened to investigate on the reality, on whether they actually happened or it's all a joke, a prank, or what it is. So you have that, but then you have the comments, which are personal, almost a memorized reflections of whoever is writing, and comments on other sort of other commenters and writers that have studied this Davidson record. The Davidson record is the pictures, the evidence that is left of these events happening in this house, which are the ones that have been investigated, and the ones that we are sort of being informed through this report. Yeah, so you have those two things happening at the same time, and they keep scaling, right? That crack in their reality, it's not only psychologically but also between them, changes the relationships. Karen, for example, his wife, Davidson's wife, she just can't even face the fact that is happening. She just escapes, goes somewhere else, builds herself a place, does anything but think about it. She does not want to know about it. Later we know that she has claustrophobia. She suffers from claustrophobia, which is related to, it's a very spatial phobia. So I guess that has a lot to do with it as well. Davidson, on the other hand, he just wants to explore, and in exploring, he gets lost in his own house. He gets into a passage that he was not supposed to get into, and he gets lost there. But it's not just that. We also get moments of ramblings where the record, we stop being told about the story, and then suddenly the writer is talking about Heidegger, and you're like, what the fuck? Why Heidegger? Well, Heidegger wrote about angst. They use the word anxiety. The word anxiety is not the same as angst, so that's a bad translation from the author. but angst is sort of like the fear of being in the world. Angst, and that is sort of like we get a passage here where like suddenly the story is interrupted, and a long quote from Heidegger is presented. And by being in the world, it means the fear of you as a being part of the world, of like something that's infinite that you cannot cognize and of which you are a part. Not anything in the world, because that would be just fear. Like I'm afraid of a tiger and escape. Angst is the fear of existing in the world. So that's angst. That angst becomes clearly palpable in especially in Karen, but in I think in all the characters to a degree. Except the kids. The kids just go about their business. They try to be in different rooms because the parents are conflicted and in a bad mental state, so the kids just decide to keep exploring the house. And from there, things keep going on. The footnotes seem disjointed sometimes, like they're talking about like their discussion, their arguments, and then suddenly you get the author, not the author, but whoever is writing the footnotes, talking about jerking off about this girl that he likes, and then he talks about how he was scanned by a couple of guys who made him believe that he was good at boxing in clandestine fights, and then they hire him, and like there's a lot going on, and those two stories, those two narratives do connect sometimes, other times don't connect. They are written very differently. It's very informal. The way in which the footnotes that are there's also two typographies. Like you have the typography of the main record, which is like that, right? Then obviously the quotes are in not now. Okay. The letters are in italics, and then the other ones that are written like writing machine. Different letters. Those are the ones that are written like in first person. Well, sorry about that. But that helps a little bit with orienting oneself in like sort of the whole story. But because there is so many things going on, it's so easy to get lost. And sometimes you're reading something and you're like, why suddenly do I get like a 3 pages rambling about echoes, and not only echoes, but like the science of echoes, everything, right? And so here, for example, we were in Navison's house on how he's investigating this new passage and what the fuck is going on there, and this door that he cannot get through because Karen asked him not to go because he's afraid, and then suddenly the author changes topic and he starts talking about like the hollowness of the house, and since objects always muffle, impede acoustic reflection, only empty places can create echoes of lasting clarity. Ironically, hollowness only increases the eerie quality of otherness inherent in an echo. Otherness inherent in an echo. So it's like the idea that like echoes are also uncanny, right? It's sort of like what the text is trying to say. It says, the apparent echo of solitary words reminds us that acoustical echoing in empty places can be a very common auditory emblem, redolent of Gothic novels as it might be, of isolation and often unwilling solitude. This is no doubt a case of natural echoes conforming to echoes' mythographic mocking, rather than affirming a role in an empty hall that should be comfortably inhabited. Echoes of our voices and motions mock our very presence in the hollow space. Then it goes into talking about like echoes in mythology and in theology, and then talks about how echoes are a way of seeing. Then talks about echolocation, and you don't understand. And then suddenly, like the writer changes topic again, and talks about like he and his life and how he cut himself, and the girl that he likes, and his feelings, and him asking her out. And then it goes back a bit later to the echoes, but not in that sense, not so explicitly in a sort of like non-fiction approach, but more because Davidson in the actual story gets through the door and keeps walking into the darkness, and then he sees one door and another door, and these are all doors that are like in his house, in that wall, like a house that has certain dimensions. The house has only a specific size, but through this passage he gets into like an infinite hall of doors and arches and there are no windowless as well. This is all windowless, so he has to go with a lantern. Sometimes the light doesn't even reach the walls. He gets lost, and in getting lost he panics, and after trying to get back he panics, and then he hears growlings and starts running, and then he hears the cries of one of his kids, and the echoes, following those echoes is what allows him to get out. After that, obviously he decides to move out of the house. They haven't moved out of the house yet. I have a feeling that that won't happen, because then the story would be lost, or maybe they will change and someone is moving to the house. I don't really know how the story continues, but this is a very interesting book. It's not so much for its prose. It has its it doesn't read like a novel. It reads like you are reading non-fiction, and that's good because it increases the feeling of the reality of the text, right? The way it's written makes you almost forget that you're reading a piece of fiction, which for those of you who read horror and enjoy the feeling of being scared, definitely increases that factor. For me, it's just very interesting. I generally like philosophical ramblings in texts, and this, it's all about like reality being questioned and how people deals with that. And yes, there is a lot of linguistics, and there's a lot of ramblings of all kinds about sound, about music, about everything. So I'm gonna continue to read this book. I don't think this is not a read along. This is just like a first impressions on the book that Criminology recommended, that I happen to be reading now, and I will make a video when I finish it. I've sort of like skimmed through the pages forward, and it looks like even in the structure it turns more and more and more strange. So I'm very excited about that. If you've read this book and you have anything of value to say, please tell me. I'm very interested. Tell me what you thought about the book. Did you like it? I think I am liking the book. This is a hard one. It's strange. I'm very curious about how will I feel when I finish it. I have no idea how this is gonna end. I hope it's not just like, because it doesn't feel like the typical Enchanted House book, right? Novel or whatever. I don't even know if this can be called a novel, but yeah, I hope it keeps surprising me and keeping me intrigued, because it's normally this kind of like mystery books tend to be very predictable to me. That's why I generally don't like mysteries, don't like suspense, don't like horror. Horror doesn't scare me in books, and mystery tends to be not so mysterious to me. This looks quite mysterious. This looks quite interesting, and I cannot predict what's gonna happen, and that's cool. So yeah, House of Leaves. I'll get back with this book when I finish it. I don't know, in 1 week or how long, because I'm gonna be hiking, and that's not the most compatible activity with my reading life. Have a good day.